The Vanishing.
Thank you for being
Lila
here
Carter
today.
stared at the
We
empty
have an
coffee
important
mug on her
announcement
kitchen
to share with
counter
you.
and felt nothing at all. The morning light filtered through her apartment windows, but she barely noticed anymore. Her phone buzzed with another text from her best friend Maya, asking where she had been for the past 3 weeks. She swiped it away without reading the full message, just like she had done with all the others. The breakup with Marcus had happened so suddenly that she still replayed that night over and over in her mind. He had simply said he needed something more and walked out of her life as if their 5 years together meant nothing. Now she spent her days in this tiny studio apartment surrounded by half-finished paintings and empty takeout containers. Her job at the advertising agency had been understanding at first, but now her boss was leaving voicemails about her extended absence. The irony was that she had always been invisible anyway, so why did it matter if she actually disappeared? Her art had become her only companion, and the canvases lining her walls told stories she could never speak aloud. Meanwhile, across the city in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Evelyn Monroe was getting ready for another charity gala. She adjusted her diamond necklace in the mirror and wondered why everything felt so hollow lately. The parties and the champagne and the endless parade of admirers had lost their sparkle somewhere along the way. Her assistant reminded her about the small gallery opening she had agreed to attend that evening in Brooklyn. Evelyn almost canceled, but something told her to go, and she always trusted her instincts. The moment she walked into that cramped gallery space, she saw the painting. It was a woman's silhouette dissolving into shadows and smoke, but there was something raw and desperate in every brushstroke. The gallery owner mentioned the artist had dropped off the piece weeks ago and never returned for the opening. Evelyn learned her name was Lila Carter and that she lived somewhere in the neighborhood. Without fully understanding why she made it her mission to find this mysterious artist, she had her people track down Lila's address and discovered she had essentially vanished from her own life. Evelyn wondered what kind of pain could make someone so talented retreat so completely. She drafted a handwritten letter and had it delivered with an invitation. The note simply said that she wanted to offer Lila a chance to escape in Paris. No strings attached, just an opportunity to disappear into something beautiful instead of fading into nothing. The invitation. Lila found the cream-colored envelope slipped under her door on a Thursday morning when she finally ventured out for groceries. The paper felt expensive between her fingers, and the handwriting was elegant in a way that seemed from another era. The letter introduced Evelyn Monroe as an admirer of her work and extended an invitation to Paris for 2 weeks. All expenses paid, with a private studio space overlooking the Seine where she could paint without interruption. At first, she thought it was some kind of joke or scam because things like this did not happen to people like her. But the letterhead was real, and a quick search showed Evelyn Monroe was indeed a wealthy heiress with connections to the art world. For 3 days, the letter sat on her counter while she debated whether responding would be insane. Her rational mind screamed that this was too good to be true, but something deeper urged her to take the leap. She finally sent a brief email accepting the invitation and asking when she should be ready to leave. The response came within an hour, with flight details for the following Monday and a phone number to call with questions. Maya called again that weekend, and this time Lila answered, telling her friend she was going away for a while. Maya was relieved to hear her voice, but worried about this mysterious trip with a stranger. Lila promised she would be careful, but admitted she needed to do something drastic before she disappeared entirely. Sunday night, she packed a single suitcase with clothes and art supplies, wondering what version of herself she would find in Paris. The car service arrived at dawn and drove her to a private airport where a jet was waiting. Evelyn Monroe stood at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in a tailored cream suit with sunglasses perched on her head. She was even more striking in person, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through Lila's carefully constructed walls. Evelyn welcomed her aboard and explained they would arrive in Paris by evening. The interior of the jet was all soft leather and warm lighting, making Lila feel like she had stepped into a dream. During the flight, they talked about art, and Evelyn shared stories about growing up in Manhattan's elite circles. Lila found herself opening up slightly about her work, though she carefully avoided mentioning Marcus or her recent isolation. There was something magnetic about Evelyn's presence, and the way she listened as if every word mattered. When they landed in Paris, a driver took them to a historic apartment building in the Marais district. The studio apartment was breathtaking, with tall windows and original hardwood floors. Evelyn showed her the art supplies she had arranged and mentioned her own suite was just one floor above. She told Lila to rest and settle in before suggesting they meet for dinner at a nearby bistro. Alone in the Paris apartment, Lila stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life below. For the first time in months, she felt something other than numbness. Part 3. The City of Light. Lila woke to golden sunlight streaming through the tall windows and the distant sound of church bells. Paris felt impossibly romantic in a way that made her heart ache with both hope and fear. She dressed in simple jeans and a sweater before venturing downstairs where Evelyn was waiting with coffee and croissants. They spent the morning wandering through narrow cobblestone streets while Evelyn pointed out hidden courtyards and her favorite bookshops. For the first time in weeks, Lila felt the weight on her chest begin to lighten. Evelyn had a way of drawing her out with questions that never felt intrusive, just genuinely curious. They visited the Musée d'Orsay, where Evelyn revealed she had studied art history at Oxford before abandoning it for the family business. Lila admitted she had never left the country before and had only dreamed of seeing these paintings in person. Evelyn promised they would see everything during their 2 weeks together. That afternoon, Lila set up her easel in the studio and began to paint for the first time since the breakup. The colors flowed differently here, as if Paris itself was bleeding into her work. Evelyn knocked on her door that evening, dressed in a black dress that made Lila's breath catch. They went to dinner at a small restaurant where Evelyn knew the owner, and they were given the best table by the window. Over wine and duck confit, Evelyn shared more about her life and the loneliness that came with her world of privilege. She confessed that most people in her circle were only interested in her money or connections. Lila found herself talking about Marcus and how she had lost herself trying to be what he wanted. Evelyn took her hand and said she saw strength in Lila's vulnerability, not weakness. Walking back through the lamplit streets, they passed street musicians and late-night cafes filled with laughter. Lila realized she was intensely aware of how close Evelyn was walking beside her. Back at the apartment building, Evelyn walked her to her door and lingered in the hallway. She told Lila she was glad she had come to Paris and that she hoped she was beginning to find herself again. Lila thanked her and watched as Evelyn climbed the stairs to her own floor. Alone again, she touched her lips, wondering why she suddenly felt so awake after months of numbness. She stared at the ceiling and admitted to herself that something was shifting inside her. The next few days fell into a beautiful rhythm of painting during the day and exploring the city with Evelyn at night. They visited the Rodin Museum and had picnics in Luxembourg Garden. Evelyn bought her art books from Shakespeare and Company, and they spent an afternoon reading by the Seine. But Lila noticed the way Evelyn looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. One evening, they attended a gallery opening where Evelyn introduced her to dealers and collectors. Everyone seemed to know Evelyn and treated her with a mixture of admiration and caution. A sophisticated older woman asked if Lila was Evelyn's latest project with a knowing smile that felt cruel. Evelyn dismissed the woman and led Lila outside where they could breathe. She apologized for exposing her to that world and admitted her reputation included a string of brief, intense connections. Lila felt her walls going back up, wondering if she was just another person Evelyn would tire of eventually. Unraveling. Lila spent the next morning alone in her studio, trying to make sense of the confusion swirling inside her. The paintings she had been working on had transformed into something darker, with shadows creeping into the edges. Evelyn appeared at her door holding 2 cups of coffee and looking uncertain for the first time since they met. She asked if she had done something wrong and whether Lila regretted coming to Paris. Lila turned to face her and admitted she was scared of becoming just another story in Evelyn's complicated history. The words hung between them heavy and honest in a way that made the air feel electric. Evelyn set down the coffee and crossed the room, explaining that nothing about this felt casual to her. She confessed that when she saw Lila's painting in that gallery, something had awakened in her that she thought had died years ago. She revealed that her entire life had been performed for an audience, and that real connection terrified her too. Lila listened as Evelyn described growing up with parents who valued appearance over authenticity and how she had learned to wear masks. Evelyn admitted she had invited Lila to Paris partly because she wanted to save her, but mostly because she needed saving herself. The vulnerability in her voice broke through Lila's defenses, and she found herself stepping closer. Their faces were inches apart, and Lila could feel the heat radiating between them. Evelyn reached up and brushed a strand of hair from Lila's face, asking if she could kiss her. Lila nodded, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home after being lost for years. They spent the rest of the day in the studio, talking and kissing and painting side by side. For the first time, Lila felt like she could breathe fully without the weight of her past crushing her. That evening, they walked to Montmartre and watched the sunset from the steps of Sacré-Cœur. Evelyn talked about her dreams of leaving the family business and doing something meaningful with her wealth. Lila shared her fear that she had wasted years of her life trying to be small enough for Marcus to love. Evelyn told her she was done making herself small and that her art deserved to be seen by the world. But as the night grew darker, Lila noticed a man watching them from across the square. She pointed him out to Evelyn, who glanced over, and her expression shifted to something guarded. Evelyn suggested they head back and seemed distracted during their walk home. Lila asked what was wrong, and Evelyn finally admitted there were things about her life she had not shared. She explained that her family's wealth came with complications, including people who monitored her activities and relationships. Lila realized that being with Evelyn meant stepping into a world of scrutiny she had never imagined. Back at the apartment, Evelyn apologized for dragging her into something messy and offered to arrange an earlier flight home. Lila surprised herself by saying she was not running away this time. She had spent months hiding from life, and she was done letting fear make her decisions. Evelyn pulled her close, and they held each other as the Paris night deepened around them. The next morning, Lila woke to find Evelyn gone, and a note saying she had business to handle. She tried to paint but could not focus, wondering what complications Evelyn was dealing with. Her phone buzzed with messages from Maya, asking when she would be back and whether she was okay. Lila sent a brief response saying she was still in Paris and would explain everything when she returned. Late that afternoon, Evelyn returned looking exhausted and troubled. She explained that her father had found out about Lila and was threatening to cut her off financially. Part 5. The Choice. Evelyn revealed that her father had always controlled her through money, using it as leverage to dictate her choices. He disapproved of her bringing a nobody to Paris and demanded she end whatever this was immediately. Lila felt her old insecurities flooding back at being called a nobody by people who had never even met her. But Evelyn quickly clarified that she had told her father exactly where he could put his opinions and his money. Lila stared at her, processing what this meant and the sacrifice Evelyn was willing to make. Evelyn explained she had been planning to break free from her family for years, but had been too afraid until now. She said meeting Lila had reminded her what it felt like to want something real more than comfort and approval. Lila felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what Evelyn was offering and the responsibility that came with it. She admitted she was terrified of being the reason Evelyn lost everything and then disappointing her anyway. Evelyn crossed to her and took both her hands, saying she was not asking Lila to be responsible for her choices. She was simply choosing a life where she could be authentic, even if that meant starting over. They spent that evening talking through fears and possibilities until the early morning hours. Evelyn suggested they extend their time in Paris while she figured out her next steps. Lila agreed, but insisted on contributing somehow and not being a kept woman in this new chapter. Evelyn promised they would figure it out together as equals, not as rescuer and rescued. The following week, they fell into a new rhythm, with Evelyn meeting with lawyers and financial advisors. Lila channeled everything into her work, creating pieces that felt raw and alive. One afternoon, a gallery owner Evelyn had introduced her to stopped by and offered Lila her first solo show. She could barely believe that her art might actually support her independently. Evelyn celebrated with her that night over champagne on the tiny balcony overlooking the Marais. They made love for the first time as the city lights twinkled around them like stars. In the morning, Lila woke wrapped in Evelyn's arms, feeling more herself than she had in years. Evelyn stirred and asked if she had any regrets about coming to Paris. Lila thought about Marcus in her old life and how she had almost let heartbreak erase her completely. She realized that vanishing into silence had actually been the beginning of finding her voice. Evelyn had not rescued her, but had offered a mirror reflecting back the strength Lila had forgotten she possessed. They decided to stay in Paris for another month, while Evelyn finalized her break from her family. Lila's show was scheduled for the fall, and they began making plans to split time between Paris and New York. But Lila knew she needed to face her old life before fully embracing this new one. She called Maya and finally explained everything that had happened over the past 2 months. Maya was shocked but supportive, saying she had been worried Lila would never come back from that dark place. Lila promised to visit soon and introduce her to Evelyn properly. That evening they walked along the Seine, talking about building a life that belonged to them alone. Evelyn admitted she was scared, but excited to discover who she was without her family's expectations. Lila confessed that she was learning to trust again, both in love and in her own resilience. They stopped on the Pont des Arts and looked out over the water as the sun set in shades of gold and pink. Evelyn asked if Lila believed in fate or if they had simply found each other at the right moment. Lila considered the question and realized it did not matter because they were here now, choosing each other every day. She had vanished into silence, but an heiress had whisked her away to Paris, and together they were creating something new. Not a fairy tale rescue, but two broken people learning to be whole while holding space for each other's healing. As the lights of Paris began to glow around them, Lila knew this was just the beginning. She had finally stopped running from her pain, and in doing so had run straight into a love worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they would face it together, no longer hiding, but boldly claiming their place in the world.